sorry, forgot to turn on the microphone. Hello and welcome to our second data center study committee. I'll call us to order. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the June 10th meeting? Supervisor Kovacevic moves. Excellent. Mayor Shondell seconds. Anything in the minutes that anyone saw that was concerning or inaccurate? None. All those in favor of approving those minutes as written, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Those are approved. Thank you. We'll jump right into our presentation by Xcel Energy.
Okay, can you hear me okay? That's close enough. Okay, I'm Alex Lewin. I'm the Community Relations Manager for Xcel Energy for the Crosse area. Thank you for hosting us tonight. I'm joined by Mara Ashton, who's our Regional Vice President of Rates and Policy out of Eau Claire. And tonight, we're just going to cover a few things. I'm going to provide a brief overview of Xcel Energy, just to set a baseline. Where we are and where we plan to go with carbon-free goals and how we plan for growth, and then discuss how Xcel plans to manage large load customers in Wisconsin. We don't have any contracts to serve at this time in Wisconsin, but we do have a case study that I want to share in our Minnesota footprint. So Xcel Energy is a vertically integrated investor-owned utility that has serve customers in our area for over 100 years. We cover 5 states in the upper Midwest footprint and serve 1.9 million electric customers, as well as over 700,000 gas customers. We operate as Northern States Power Minnesota and Northern States Power Wisconsin, our 2 different operating areas. I mentioned we're vertically integrated. So we do own generation assets across our footprint, and then we connect those generation assets with transmission lines that interconnect across state lines. And we also serve, so those transmission lines serve our distribution nodes, and those serve our residential, commercial, and industrial customers. In Wisconsin, we operate as Northern States Power, and we serve over 500 communities in the western third of the state. We serve over about 266,000 electric customers and 118,000 gas customers with a reliability of 99.98%.
What are you doing?
So the page 1 of the handout kind of talks about Northern States Power Wisconsin, some information about our operating company here in Wisconsin. In 2010, we committed to increase our renewable generation portfolio to incorporate carbon-free goals. And 2017, we were the first utility in the country to announce a goal of 100% carbon-free energy by 2050. So as of 2025, we've achieved 69% carbon-free generation from our assets that wind, such as our Buffalo Ridge site in Minnesota, solar site in Sherco, and our Sherco coal site in Becker, Minnesota, our 19 hydro dams in Wisconsin, and our 2 nuclear plants, one in Red Wing and one in Monticello. And we've reduced carbon emissions by 62% since 2005. We have a strong path to get to 80 to 84% carbon-free generation by 2030. And we have an integrated resource plan that looks out 15 to 20 years and gives us a strong runway to achieve these goals. It provides a pathway to achieve our carbon goals, maintain a low portion of wallet share, which is a measure of affordability related to overall expense of electric service based on household income, and projected growth. The integrated resource plan also allows Xcel to best placement of new generation assets to effectively and efficiently serve capacity needs across our upper Midwest footprints. So our integrated resource plan, we're planning to phase out our coal plants by 2030. We're going to add 4,000 megawatts of wind solar by 2030. And we are going to extend our nuclear fleet. We've already extended them and gotten approval to 2050. And then we're also going to be looking at innovative technologies such as hydrogen and small modular nuclear. One item to note, we just finished phase 3 of our solar at our Sherco site, which is in Sugar County, in Becker, and that site now has 710 megawatts of solar. When we talk about electric terms, we talk about megawatt. That megawatt depends on the site you look at. That serves about 400 to 700. So you talk about thousands of megawatts or just multiply. Next, I just wanted to transition to talking about connecting new customers. So when we look at connecting new customers, we treat every customer the same. We go through the same application process because every customer has a different capacity need. And so when we get those requests in, we undergo distribution studies, transmission studies, and generation studies. So as the amount of capacity goes up, the study gets a lot bigger. We're also mindful of customer data privacy that's directed by state law. So we have to protect customer data, and there's a state law that dictates that. We continually work with local economic development organizations such as Seven Rivers Alliance, LADCO, our community economic development partners, and our communities to expand, relocate, and bring in new customers to our areas. When we talk about large customers, we're typically talking about customers that are 100 megawatts or larger. In our upper Midwest footprint, we've had study requests for 30 gigawatts of load in our upper Midwest footprint. But as I mentioned, we don't have any large projects contracted to serve for the construction Wisconsin. There's also the obligation to serve. So Wisconsin law requires utilities to provide reasonably adequate service to customers that are requesting service. There's only a few exceptions that service can be denied, such as safety concerns, interference with service to others, and regulatory violations. As I mentioned, customer information is protected in Wisconsin by state law, and then also under the federal critical infrastructure regulations, Homeland Security Act, and the Cybersecurity Information Act. So on page 2, I printed off our proposed large load tariff, just some information about it. Public Service Commission of Wisconsin oversees all rate requests to Excel as an investor-owned utility to provide transparency and allows public input as well as businesses. Knowing that we have an obligation to serve, we created this tariff to protect existing customers. And the tariff itself really focuses on 3 categories. And the rate itself looks at customer protection and cost responsibility, grid reliability and system planning, rate stability, and customer benefits. So the customer protection and cost responsibility piece, this rate is mandatory for all customers at 100 megawatts or larger. Focuses large load customers paying 100% of transmission connections before they're energized. Large load customers pay for new generation resources through dedicated rates, and it includes a 15-year contract that automatically ends for 5 years. It has exit fees and security provisions. So we talk about grid reliability and system planning, especially with these large size customers. It's very important. Transmission and generation infrastructure must be planned and constructed before they're connected. Infrastructure planning and permitting are funded by the large load customers. And it does allow for innovative partnerships and emerging technologies to come into play on those. And then for rate stability and customer benefits, we estimate that there'd be a 1 to 2% rate reduction for existing customers for every 1,000 megawatts that are developed. It'll generate property tax. There's some workforce part of it and other economic development development benefits. And we also estimate 120 to 180 million dollars annually in utility paid state and federal taxes, as well as customer rate reductions for every 1,000 megawatts built. We filed this rate June 22nd of 2026. The commission has a timeline process they go through, and we expect the results from them in early 2027. The tariff will be reviewed and updated every 2 years, and there's no confidential redacted materials included with the filing, and I can provide the docket number if that's something you want to take a look at. As I mentioned, the commission has a timeline they go through to review it. It includes public input, written and verbal, includes allows other groups to provide their input on it. Then they do discovery and technical aspects of it, and then final decision. So the last item I want to talk about is it's on page 3 is a Google data center collaboration that we have. So this is our footprint where they have a large territory approved, and the Google has agreed, part of it, they're paying for all the infrastructure, all the development costs underneath that large load tariff. They committed to fund 1,900 megawatts of nuclear energy, but includes 1,400 megawatts of wind, 200 megawatts of solar, and then battery energy storage for that. So we expect to see increased property tax revenue from that. They committed $24 million to local schools, and we anticipate $20 million in upgrades to local infrastructure. So to summarize, Xcel's proposed large load tariff ensures customers that are requesting 100 megawatts or more pay the full cost of the infrastructure, pay to serve them while protecting existing customers from financial risk. The proposed tariff approach is built around 3 principles: protecting existing customers, maintaining system reliability, and enabling responsible economic development in Wisconsin communities. It also supports transparency and clean energy investment. The large load growth presents opportunities and challenges, but Xcel Energy is well positioned to manage this growth due to its strength as an industry leader, and as well as delivering safe, reliable, clean, affordable electricity. And so that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, are you willing to take some questions?
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Supervisor Doyle.
Can you talk about what I've referred to as the lateral cost? So, looking at the Pine Island Data Center, it says that the all electrical infrastructure is paid for by the entity. How far does that expand? In other words, you have power lines go across the state, you can see that go all over the place. Are you able to isolate it that, the ripple effect of this new facility, or even if it's 200 miles away, or how you look at those kind of collateral costs?
I will ask Mark, should I pull up and help assist with that question?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mara Ashman. And before I start, I just want to say it's so nice to be back in your community. My dad grew up in Crosse with my parents. Met in a freshman English class at UWL, so it's been really delightful to be back in your community. Your question was about whether new large load tariffs will pay for kind of like those historic costs of the system. And the answer to that is yes. So what data centers will do is they will pay for a slice of the historic system. There's existing transmission lines and grids that are necessary to provide service to all of our customers, including them. And then they will also pay for the incremental costs that they will bring to the system. So when any new customer comes to our system, and especially a data center like this or a large load, we will do a study and say, gee, this is the biggest customer that we have on our system. How will we serve them? What is needed? And that will likely be generation. It will certainly be transmission lines to get that generation to the load center. So they will pay for that, and then also their stuff.
Thank you.
Supervisor Schlangen?
Just a couple of questions, and I'm gonna follow in with on the, they're gonna be paying for transmission, new generation substation. So as they do that, will Excel then not try to get a rate of return on those items since they didn't pay for them in their rate?
The answer is, it depends on the type of equipment. So we are actually asking large loads who come to the system to pay upfront for any distribution that they cost and any transmission that they cost. Because they are paying for that upfront, we don't need a rate of return on that, right? The concept of a rate of return on investment, if we're recovering it over time, then we should a return on sort of just like on loan payments.
So we'll fit in your asset base at all then.
Not the transmission or the distribution, but that we bill for those customers, we'll ask them to pay upfront, but we will get a rate of return from those large load customers on the generation.
Okay, and so you mentioned generation. So I see in this one that Google is gonna fund 1,900 megawatts generation. Since they are not a utility, will they be paying full tax on that to the township where they get?
I apologize, I'm a regulatory professional here in Wisconsin, and so I don't, we have another operating company in Minnesota, I'm not aware of.
What I'm saying is, it's not a utility, so if you put one, let's say someone in Wisconsin put a data center up, they put a 400 megawatt solar farm up. Because Excel would not own that, I would expect that it would be taxed fully by the local township as if it was a non-utility asset.
Thank you for that clarifying question. We will actually own the generation, that specific customer. So in a Pine Island example, we are essentially building and owning infrastructure.
But it says here that they're gonna fund it, so you're gonna take their dollars and then you're gonna get a rate of return out of which would raise customers' rate. Or the dollars you didn't invest.
So the Google will be paying in that instance, Google will be paying for that, their investment.
So they would pay the 10.1% rate of return or whatever on that generation that they fund. Or will they receive that? Good. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
When you're talking about, large entities using a grid, so battery energy storage system can transfer large amounts of electricity to and from the system, because that qualifies as a large entity as well. Even though they're not consuming it, they're consuming it to store it, and then they're sending it back out with large amounts. Is that also a large customer of this one?
That's a good question. Typically, the large battery energy storage is owned by Excel. But if I guess I don't know if a customer with battery energy storage. I know in Minnesota we currently have a battery energy storage program in Minnesota, and I'm not familiar with how that works as far as dispatching and the cost and benefit. So are you talking about like a customer owned?
So same thing, so the private company comes in and says, we want to capture excess energy on the grid, when it's 50 degrees and sunny.
Sure.
And all that solar, it's windy and it's sunny. So there's cheap electricity being produced, we're gonna store it in our battery system. And tomorrow we're gonna go up to 90 degrees, sell it for a higher rate, and that's how we're gonna make a profit. Would that company own that battery system as a large generator like this? Or would Excel own it? Like charge them to put that infrastructure.
So there's, so if a company would come in and do that, we have rates already set for that, for like parallel generation. But if, let's say Excel would do an RFP and say, hey, we want a company to build a large battery storage system, then there's a contractor to go along with that. It's like building a solar array farm. It would be the same thing where either Excel would own it or they would do the power purchase agreement. So, does that answer your question?
Mayor Washington Spivey, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for providing this presentation. My question is, and you can use this example if there's others. How has Excel worked with municipalities when it comes to the construction of your, I guess, equipment in the data center, that whole entire process? Can you speak to any of that?
So, we haven't built any in Wisconsin yet. And I'm not sure on the process, how we did it in Minnesota, the action that we had. But as far as tech, for normal economic development, we're working with our economic development partners constantly with new businesses that want to relocate to our area, whether it's, a cheese plant or cottage cheese facility, or maybe it's a foundry that wants to relocate. Typically, by the time they're already working with the customers, or working with the communities on that, and kind of coming to the tail end, hey, we need power for this, or gas for this facility. There are times when we collaborate pretty closely, and hey, we got this customer coming in, and they need this amount of capacity on the electric side, gas side, and then we work with that customer to get their loans and bring it in. So, and yeah, I mean, as far as economic development goes, we're out at different trade shows and talking to customers, and obviously we're involved, but here with Crosse, Seven Rivers, and then we do some work with county administrators or city administrators in the areas to say, hey, we got a potential customer that might be interested. Data centers are a little different. I think they're doing a lot of outreach on themselves to reach out to communities, and then they're doing study requests with different utilities. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
I think you did. I think you did. Basically, the municipality worked with the company, and then second stage, you all come in kind of tell them to build the infrastructure you need for it to be a successful data center.
Hopefully it's early on, so we can plan accordingly.
I guess that's more so what I'm kind of curious about. Like, is there any coordination between the municipality, Excel, the data center to really be able to move something forward or address whatever concerns or issues may come about?
Sure.
I'm also curious to know if there's any failures, but I mean, it's probably too soon to tell around that. But when we talk about customer rates not going up, I kind of want to know. It's one of those like prove it to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you bring in this large company that's going to increase usage. I would be curious to see like data that shows the impact. If there is any, there's not any impact to residents around that.
Yeah. I guess Mara wants to share. Go ahead.
On your last point about kind of the prove it to you, I hear that, and the way our large load tariff proposal is structured is that we would kind of look at those large load. Here in Wisconsin, we must file a rate case every 2 years. That's how Wisconsin regulation works. And so we've committed to kind of check in on those large load tariff rates and show what they are paying, kind of what the costs are to the system, and prove it out that they are impacting for their selective systems and what they cost. And maybe, well, I hope it, but while this is large loads are certainly something new that we're all beginning to think about together, kind of working with communities and working with customers is something Excel Energy and other utilities have been doing for 100 years and will continue to do. We're really mindful of the fact that we build, infrastructure that will be in communities for decades, and want to make sure that hearing all the interests from all those parties as we consider them.
Thank you. Also, I want to say that to me, like,
No,
like Alex, I had a question.
Go ahead. Right on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Said that in a while in this room. My question is about those unique situations or like the load patterns in electrical grids when like the peak energy usage when demand is high and you know that you have these large scale customers. I'm not sure if I read this somewhere in some parts of the country looking at rooms that might scale back, or if the system begins to fail, or there's damage like an ice storm or something like that. Some of the first to go might be these larger data centers that are not mission critical, but I'd like to still have my electricity in my home and still run my furnace. Well, freeze to death. So those meetings, how do you approach, or how do you generally approach large customers in planning like peak load times, like today this afternoon at 3 o'clock, it's 80 degrees and 85% humidity. Or thinking ahead to those situations like that, like in Texas, when their grid pretty much all failed due to weather situations, and how do you proactively plan for that?
Yeah, so.
You can, so sorry, you.
I'll just, yeah, so right now Excel has programs, phone training programs that we work with customers on. Give them a benefit for being part of the program, and our key account managers work with our large customers that are on the program to do that. We also have different programs, AC switch, switch saver for your air conditioning unit. While it's small, they have. And so we manage it that way. We also have capacity planners and market supply people that are constantly watching the grid. I will have to ask Mara if that's part of the tariff that's filed. So
It is a aspect. So Alex did a wonderful job talking about the demand response programs for what we have for our existing customers. Well, in our large load tariff, we did not propose kind of peak demand rate, but rather contemplated that would be something that we certainly want and that our large loads would want as well. And what we said is, because we don't know what that will look like today, what that agreement would look like to reduce our demand on the highest days, that we would negotiate that agreement and then take it back to the Public Service Commission for their review. So it is contemplated. Think about some peak demand for these potentially very large loads for
And then what happens when the lines all freeze and those emergency situations that involve, I mean, it's not a peak load situation, it's kind of a situation where you have limited capabilities and the sun's gone out and then you come home and how do you make the most use of what will be left is I think and you get a little bit hydroelectric, I mean, in those kind of situations.
yeah, we do have peaking plants also that are natural gas that we bring online. Right now, all of our plants in the Twin Cities are all natural gas. So we do have natural gas generation too. But yeah, I mean, we also have looking at battery storage, looking at different types of battery storage. There's an iron form battery that well rusting. So it's away from your traditional batteries. Virtual power plants, we're doing pilot studies on that. We combine multiple types of resources, lots of different locations, a whole lot of it. We just did a pilot study on that in Colorado, possibly thermal generation. So yeah, I mean, we're always looking at that as we're adding more wind and solar, adding more battery storage systems. So.
Okay, Supervisor Kovacevich?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, these binding long-term agreements, 15 years, is that something new because of the communities or recently, or is that always part of your process?
Different projects that we've had, kind of different length contracts. Our regulatory team looked at the Mara. Do you have any feedback on the length of term? 5%, 15?
Yes, so in the large load tariff filing that we made on June 22nd, this year, we have said that all customers on this rate, so everyone connecting 100 megawatts or more, must be agreed to a 15-year term. And that is just because these are such large customers that we need to make capital intensive plans for them. But it's kind of in our interest and in their interest that have a long-term.
Mr. Hoyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple questions. I might even have more as we go. As these large, I forget the term, these large use customers come in, what is the average length of transmission line? How far away is this power coming from to supply these potential large use customers?
Well, just when we look at our footprint in our upper Midwest area, it depends on where it's located. It could be, a couple miles away, it could be 80 miles away, 100 miles away. Kind of depends on where we can site that generation in, and then how we have to build that network out to get to them. So, sorry. Thank you.
That's exactly right. Maybe just to add some color, as these potential customers are coming to us, we actually do multiple layers of studies to understand kind of can we serve this customer at the location they have selected for us to study today, or if not, what would we need to serve them? So we actually do, and forgive me, I'm not a transmission planner, so 2 to 3 layers of kind of like increasing granularity of study of what we will need to serve your customers. So unfortunately, the direct answer to your question of how long would the transmission lines be, the answer is it depends. It depends on where they're looking to locate and what upgrades to our system would be necessary just to serve them.
Okay, thank you. Following up on that, as these large load customers are potentially cited, what is the thought process of these customers being self-sufficient in their energy creation, such as on-site energy creation, to help alleviate the peak power poles and the catastrophes that we have seen in the past years when the major weather event comes through?
I don't work for a large load customer, so it's challenging for me to speculate. I understand that large load customers don't want to own their own generation, but they do understand the expectation, the increasing expectation that they pay kind of full rate for what they cost for the system.
Okay, is there room in this scenario for large load customers to be their own energy producers?
I believe so, yes. Their owning their own generation may open them up to kind of regulation, being regulated themselves. And so that would be part of the equation for a potential customer.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Supervisor Schlangen, go ahead.
Just one question, beyond electricity, okay? What advice would you have for municipals, towns, and counties with these large customers if they get the opportunity to do a development agreement?
Yeah, so communities have the opportunity to set expectations, like rails, provide, feedback, what you want to see in the community, what expectations you have, what benefits do you want to see in the community? Do you want to see support schools, road infrastructure? I think it's really up to the communities to really define what they want, with that agreement. So it's kind of explain my opinion. So
So they could basically after anything, new sewer systems and water systems and roads, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I guess that's my opinion, but
There, Washington Friday, go ahead.
You might have an answer to this or not, I don't know. But as a company who benefits from data centers financially, I'm curious, in what ways do you all kind of give that money back into the community?
so currently our foundation gives back to our communities. And then also we have local sponsorships giving back to our communities. So part of my role is giving back to our communities. We also, like I said, our foundation gives back to our communities. That's where we give back to our communities. And our employees also volunteer in our communities. They're out there coaching little league kids and ice hockey and all the different arts and volunteering in our community. So not only spending or donating back to the community, but also volunteering.
Okay, anyone else? Alex and Mara, thank you so much. Okay, the next presenter is Darylyn Power.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Cochran. I'm an economic development manager with Darylyn Power. I'm a resident of La Crosse. I live just in Clifford Block in the city of La Crosse with my wife and 2 kids, and I've got 2 more on the way, so take your thoughts and prayers for that now. So I say that I'm both professionally and personally obligated to ensure that City of La Crosse County, and our greater Coulee region, Driftless region are a great place to live, work, and play. So excited to be here kind of following you tonight to talk about our perspective at Darylyn Power and all our member cooperatives that we work with that serve this region and the greater Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois areas that I'll highlight here in a second. Talk about kind of my role at Darylyn as an economic development manager. I work with all of our member co-ops and communities that they serve to help to try to expand existing businesses, attract new businesses. We work and do a lot of work with the different community organizations, regional economic development groups, Seven Rivers Alliance, with the county, a variety of other players that are kind of behind the scenes to help grow this area, grow the county. Because these areas grow, we have the opportunity to serve our load, and that's a good thing for our members. I asked for assistance on that. I only have like 8 slides, so I only asked for here. So who's Darylyn Power Cooperative? So we're a generation and transmission cooperative. So the main difference between us and Excel is that we generate the power, we transmit the power across regional areas, just like Excel. But the actual distribution level members are served, or we call members, Excel customers, are actually served by all of the 24 Class A member co-ops or the municipals that we have called out in that map there. So that's kind of the main difference there. Our rates are also governed by our board of directors, not by the Public Service Commission. So we set our rates that they then get approved by our board of directors, which is made up by 1 director from each of our 24 Class A member cooperatives. So we're based out of La Crosse here. Our headquarters building actually gets its power from Xcel Energy, so we have a very close relationship with Xcel. We have a lot of projects, regional transmission projects that we partner with them on. As I'll talk about later, a lot of our conversations as it relates to planning for these large loads involves working with Xcel. So there's multiple layers of review that go into that, but without getting too far ahead, we provide energy to over 800,000 consumers across the 44,000 square mile service area. We have over 3,700 miles of transmission lines, 400 distribution substations, $1.84 billion in assets, and a little over 500 employees. Next slide. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about who's developing these data center projects. We're a little different. A lot of our cooperatives serve most of the rural areas in and around La Crosse. So if you think about the electric service areas as um, kind of help visualize, think about it like a slice of Swiss cheese. Basically, all the holes of the Swiss cheese are the larger cities that are usually served by like an XL or a Lion. We're all the cheese in the middle. So we serve a lot of rural areas, and so our perspective is a little bit different. We don't see as many of these large hyperscaler developers come through just because we don't have some of the same transmission capacity that our partners, XL and Alliant typically see. So we work with a lot of developers that I would consider like mom and pop developers, and even some of these developers who are working on these hyperscale projects are 2, 3, 5, 10-person shops that are just like any other developer that you work with. It's working with businesses to bring projects to cities and help build that bridge between the city and then the businesses that are looking to invest in that area. So the rendering that you see there is about that project right there is about a 10 megawatt project. The footprint of it is about the size of like an electrical substation, so 2-3 acres. 10 megawatts, 400, we'll just call it 500 homes per megawatt. So what's 500 times 10, that's 5,000? 5,000 homes worth of electricity right there, and just a small footprint. So you can again appreciate the scale of these hyperscale projects that are coming through. But whether it is a smaller developer or a larger developer, they usually always have a phased development approach. So they don't want to build out an entire huge project from the get-go. That's a lot of risk for them and for their investors. What they want to do is have a phased development approach, kind of prove it out, make sure that it works, that it's working, that things are running smoothly, and then continue to build and extend from there, just like any other business model would. So that's something that we see a lot. And then from my own personal experience, I kind of serve as that first phone call for a lot of developers who are interested in doing projects, even before they reach out to counties and cities. They're reaching out to the utilities because they want to know, can you guys even power this site? So we're often the first phone call. And what I've noticed throughout my time at Dairyland, I've been here for coming up on 2 years now, is that projects where the developer is very transparent, open, great communicators with both municipalities that they're working with, as well as us as the utility and any other players that are involved. When they have a collaborative way about going about developing their projects, and they're open and they're wanting to engage the public, they're wanting to do those public meetings to ask those detailed questions about their projects, because no two data centers are alike, just like any other type of business. That they want to see that collaborative effort between all entities involved. And so those are the projects that move forward. So as you get into questions and thinking about like, what types of things should we be asking for? You should be asking for community benefit agreements. You should be asking for development agreements that have positive impacts for the areas that you are all responsible for, either governing or whatever your role is in this room tonight. So again, when they come and they're asking questions about how can they collaborate, not what incentives do you have, what's the cheapest you can get me my power. Those are the developers that we see get projects further along. And similar to Upsell, we don't have any currently signed contracts to develop data centers right now in Crosse County. But I can tell you from my experience that folks have been knocking at the door for a little while now. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Or I think personally that something will come to the table, whether it's that county or the city or one of the cities in this region. Next slide. So what are other communities doing? That was one of the questions, and given my role is kind of seeing things regionally, working in Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois, just want to talk about some of the things that I've seen in communities, both successful and unsuccessful. So first and foremost, what you guys are doing tonight in this committee that you've established is the very first step you should be doing. You should be working with your staff to understand, do all ordinances to support these types of projects, where are the gaps, where is the lack of understanding, where is there not, transparency in the development process that we maybe need to make clear with the communities, getting that understanding before they happen, proactively reaching out. I've seen cities in Minnesota places just do town halls on data centers, just like data centers. Let's talk about them. Let's bring in the utilities, talk about the electric infrastructure. Let's talk about how this would work from a development standpoint. Educate the community before you have a project come in, because when you have a project come in and all of a sudden they feel like you've been talking to somebody for 3 months without letting anybody know, that's when the distrust happens, and that's when projects go to ask for us to discuss. Now there's a fascinating white paper that just came out too that talks about the forest project. If you guys don't already know about that, it basically talks about what the 5 infrastructure pitfalls of that project were. Really highly encourage you. I'll send a link to that. on it afterwards, but, really great white paper done by a former aligned executive who now runs a consulting firm that helps with talking about or preparing cities for infrastructure for large projects. Establishing clear development pathways, just like you would expect with any other developer. If you have a very muddy or unclear development process and your ordinance is all over the place, you're not clear, there's no clear pathway to what getting a project they're bringing to you looks like. That's not something that they're going to be super happy, just like you would with any other developer, right? And then again, seeking out partners, looking for partnerships, bringing in utilities like you are tonight to get informed about what it's like from the utility perspective, to talk about what are truths, what are myths, what are the misinformation that's out there about data centers. Looking for partners who are seeking that out and having the cities really lead that effort too. I think it's important for the counties as well. Next slide. So let's talk about how Dairyland evaluates these large loads, and we have large data center loads on here, but I can also put large loads, like whether you want to put a 50 megawatt manufacturing facility or 50 megawatt data center at a certain spot. If you ask one of our transmission planners, it doesn't matter like what type of business use it is, 50 megawatts is 50 megawatts. So if a large load is coming in, this is kind of the process that we generally follow to plan for that and to appropriately protect our end use numbers from any rate changes that might happen because of that. So first and foremost, we have a number of different screening studies that we have to run through, where there's actually application fees that we charge those prospective projects to pay for our transmission planners, our engineers, our staff's time to do those studies, to come back and say, this is how much a project is going to cost, this is how long it's going to take. Are you wanting to move forward and put, corporate design closet to then start take that next step even further? So before we even start the study process to evaluate these large loads, we require a financial commitment from the developer or from whoever is applying for this for a load, right? To get started. And then along the way, there's different steps where we're requiring deposits. And then, before we actually start construction, we're requiring that full contribution of what the project is going to cost. It's going to cost $5 million to build infrastructure to serve that load. $5 million is used today before we start construction. So we're not paying for it, but before we start construction, that varies a little bit there. So ratepayer protection. So Dairyland Power, Xcel Energy, Alliant, a number of other utilities and major players in the space actually signed a federal ratepayer protection pledge towards the end of July. So okay, actually can't see that context there, which is a commitment from all the utilities in North that signed that basically states that data centers and the cost causers for these projects are going to be cost payers for these projects. So there's been questions asked about the infrastructure that goes in. I mean, basically, the grid is interconnected. So the question about like where would the power be coming from? The days of like Alma coal plant powering like this area, that's not really a thing anymore. The grid is all interconnected, and everyone's generating power and selling it into a marketplace, and also buying it from that marketplace too. So when you think about building infrastructure in a specific area, really the cost that we're requiring these projects to pay up front is the infrastructure that allows those projects to tap into those large pockets of electricity that are flowing through the regional and highways of power lines that you see in and around the area. So again, the developers fund these feasibility studies and upgrades, and we have a commitments that our existing end use members are not going to be paying for the cost of those projects. And then I mentioned we coordinate with Xcel on these projects. So when we do a study and look at a project and what's the impact to the regional grid, when I throw 100 megawatts here, throw 50 megawatts there, 60 megawatts there, 1,000 megawatts, whatever that amount is, what we do is we review internally with our own transmission planning team. Sometimes we bring consultants to review these loads, but there's certain areas, for example, Village of Holman, the Bluffview or the Holman Business Park up there. So that area is for the most part served by Riverland Energy Cooperative, but the majority of the transmission infrastructure that's bringing in a lot of the big lines that you see out there around 35 or 53 hours stuff. London will cross for 3 days, but yeah, that transmission structure is actually in majority owned Xcel, or it's a consortium. consortium, thank you. We have to coordinate with them because in order to get power to that site, we have to be in contact with other utilities who are developing this project. So oftentimes, there's not only just one utility that's reviewing the project, it's multiple utilities. And then once we do our review, it actually gets kicked up to MISO, which is the regional transmission operator, the basically air traffic controller for the electric grid in our region. They do a review of 2 to 3 months before they come back and say, yeah, your project is approved, this all looks good, and you can move forward. So all in all, from the first point of contact until a project is basically approved or studied, approved, and ready to start construction, and that itself can take 18 months to 2 years. Even longer to get going. So there's significant studies and risk analysis, you name it, we've looked at what type of impact this could have to ensure that the grid stays stable, even after you add this load in, and making sure that the infrastructure is going to do that. So there's multiple levels of review. Next slide. Okay, so I'll talk a little about what the benefit is to utilities and why that's a good thing for end use members or customers. I'm a customer of Excel. So first and foremost, they provide stable, continuous load. I talked about our friends in our transmission planning department. There's nothing worse that they don't like dealing with than really large fluctuations in power that sometimes come when you have a manufacturing facility or people getting up in the morning and turning on all their hair dryers. All the dairy farms cranking up in the morning for running their operation. They like stable, continuous flow. That makes it easy to plan for. Data centers that are running 24/7 provide that. It's consistent. We know it's going to be there. We know they're paying for the electricity, and we can build the infrastructure to support that. I mentioned the phased load growth. We really appreciate when folks don't want to just go from 0 to 100 with a big project. They want to kind of build it out over time, have that kind of proof of concept established before they continue to expand further along. Make more investments. Having that phased approach is helpful for us from a planning perspective. So just the nature of that is important. The backup generation and resilience. I've talked with a lot of developers, and I don't have any specific data or a stat or something to back this up, but from my conversations with developers and some of these companies, Meta, Google, Amazon, the need for the backup generation is really mainly to allow for them to stay online long enough during an outage so that when that outage happens, they can actually disperse and transfer that data to other sources so that they can kind of be running at like a 10% level for however long that outage happens. So a lot of the time, the backup generation is battery storage and the projects that, the additional generation that they need. I mean, oftentimes it can be for actually supporting the data center, but it's often to just be able to support kind of transitioning off and be able to lower that load down. So, they are providing that backup generation, and in some instances are wanting to develop that. And then financial benefits for utilities. So there's really only 2 ways that we can help cut costs at Dairyland or member cooperatives. That's either to reduce operational costs, which I don't think anybody here would guess that the cost of goods and contractors and all that stuff is going to go down in the next however many years. It's only gone up exponentially however many years. So we can either cut costs that way, or we can add more load. Those are the 2 ways. There's only 2. So when you add more load, that puts downward pressure on rates. We don't have any commitments that we put out yet that we're going to lower rates 10% in the next 2 years because of data center loads that we're adding on it. Like that, we don't have any signed contracts for data centers in this area. But one of our transmission partners, ITC, which is they're a transmission only company, so they don't do the generation, they don't serve people directly, but they have a lot of transmission lines in the country. They've actually made a commitment, and I don't have it pulled up here, but they're committing to by 2030, their rates are going to decrease anywhere between 12 to 20% over the next 4 years because of all these large loads that are going to be coming online, putting that downward pressure. I mean, I don't know a single company out there that has committed to we're going to decrease our prices over the next 4 years by X amount of percent. I haven't seen that, especially not since pretty much COVID. So there is a financial benefit for utilities, and that gets passed along to the end use members and customers by lower rates. So it's not a promise, but I can confidently say that adding a lot of load helps with downward pressure on rates. So next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about the regional community benefits of data centers, and data center development. So prior to my role at the airline, I used to work for municipalities in Minnesota. So I was a planner and actually a certified planner. I kind of a professional, so I was doing Sam here in a previous life, so still recovering from the public service. But for really from a community development aspect, and I need to pull up my notes that I had on this. There's really three main areas where these projects help. It's in tax base. It's in helping to pay for infrastructure when you have a community benefit that says, in addition to developing this parcel, we're going to help improve the sewer infrastructure. We're going to help build some new roads. We're going to build a new water tower. Tax-based infrastructure, and then the negotiated benefits. I've mentioned a couple times now, community benefits agreements. That's something that I would highly recommend that each city that's going to be working with data centers try to negotiate. And that is, you could consider it to be a development agreement kind of on steroids, but some of them have development agreements and then also community benefit agreements where they're going above and beyond, donating land, doing conservation efforts. I mean, you guys hold the power, so you should be at the table wanting to negotiate and hear what they have to bring to your communities. So there's the economic investment, there's job creation, to help diversify rural economies. I mean, a lot of rural economies are fairly simple. They're based on the 1, 2, or 3 businesses that power that small town. And so anything you can do to diversify that economy, help support some of the universities and educational systems in areas. Western Technical College is pumping out graduates that are going to be working at data centers down the road. There's a lot of majors out there right now for work that would allow you to work at data centers and in the great technology sector. And then just again, infrastructure and system strengthening. So one last example I want to give, try to kind of explain from like the utility and the transmission grid infrastructure standpoint and what it means to have a private funding source come in to help fund an otherwise public utility. You know, imagine if you have a gas. I'm sure everyone around here is familiar with the Loves on I-90 in St. Charles, right? You've been that way. Hopefully, been out that way. If you don't, it's like a little state concentrated in Wisconsin, but head that way. Imagine you have that interchange where Loves is situated. 20 years ago, let's say that interchange was not what it was today. You have Loves come in and say, you know, we want to put a Loves gas station in here, but the current interchange is not going to allow for the traffic and all the things that are going to happen in order to have that Loves be there. We'd love to come in and pay for that interchange so that we can be there, so that there's no disruption to the local traffic flows. And oh, by the way, that's also a benefit to that road that crisscrosses with I-90, because now you've got an improved interchange that allows people to safely get onto and get off of I-90. That's kind of, you know, a loose side example of like what's kind of happening right now with these data centers offering to pay for this infrastructure that otherwise would be borne back by the utility customers. Like they're offering to pay for these upgrades. So like MISO is looking at some of these regional projects that need to happen and go, oh shoot, well, if this data center is going to come and require all these, you know, $50 million in upgrades, you don't have to do this project and have it be borne by the utilities. So it really is a unique opportunity that we're in right now to help have private development fund public infrastructure. So that's kind of all I'll add on that. I think that is everything I have. So one last point, there was a question about kind of communities, what other communities are doing. I would say Pine Island, the Google project, is a great example from partnerships with the utility, with the developers, with Google, the public engagement process. I mean, they've done a million different public engagement meetings. Forget what the consulting firm is that's doing, I think it's Ryan Companies. Ryan Companies, the developer on the project, has been, and they have an office dedicated to that project and have been down there. Some of the people work for Ryan Companies have been down there more than they've been with their own families. Pine Island, Canyon Falls, Minnesota is a great example of a project where they negotiate that agreement. So I would recommend looking that up. And there's actually a presentation that their city administrator did where he walked from start to where they're at now and all the things that they did. Just great place to get education on that. And then as far as what not to do, DeForest, Wisconsin is a prime example of how that project basically fell apart because of 5 structural gaps. They didn't have a data center policy before the project came to them, proposal came to them, so they didn't have any of the language around to be able to address the project, the size of it, the $12 million project. They didn't have a transparency protocol, that's kind of what I would call it. They did not do a great job with kind of keeping the public aware of what was going on in there and their meeting conversations. Their staff was overwhelmed. They had an infrastructure assessment that arrived too late. And then there wasn't really an organized channel for resident input. And I kind of think that's both on the developer and the community itself. But I'll send the staff the white paper that I'm referencing. And again, highly recommend you read that. It's just fascinating. A $12 billion project came and went in a matter of 4 months. So just interesting stuff. Person who's fascinated about that kind of thought. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Go ahead, Mr. Dubai.
Just a question, as a cooperative customer myself, and if I'm wrong, correct me, you're not, the proposal that Excel put forth in July with a 15-year tariff and things like that agreement, co-ops aren't bound by that because you're not regulated by the Public Service Commission. So how do you, there's the initial cost of putting a high-load customer and protecting your ratepayers, but how do you protect that customer for 15 years?
Yeah,
Well,
the project goes away in 3 years and you've built all this infrastructure for.
Right, and then what do you do? That's, now it's kind of the benevolence of the board of directors of whatever co-op, because that's what they want to do, but there's nothing really binding the co-op to follow up and really protect the taxpayer.
Yeah, we're exploring some of the long-term agreements, and then, I mean, typically, we tend to follow suit with best practices for these types of things. They haven't established anything yet, but I would say that it's not on the table to have these long-term commitments, long-term agreements. You're paying, 10 years of transmission charges upfront before the project is going live to be able to protect in the instance where something like that happens. So I think there's conversations about that, but we haven't formed them.
Any other questions? You put Excel so much in the hot seat that all of those questions are in.
Okay. Happy to answer the questions you asked before from Darren's perspective too, if you want to get another look in.
Mr. Hoare, go ahead.
Thank you. You made mention that one of the ways you see the cost of power to go down is to put larger loads online. Where do you see these loads coming from?
When you say where do we see them coming from?
Yeah, you made reference to or we can one of the ways to lower costs is to deliver larger loads of power.
Yeah, is
Where do you see that
to add load. So to have more electricity, to sell more electricity, basically.
So where do you see that generated at? How do you see that getting to the area that you want it? Or where do you see that generation at?
Where do you see where do we see more electric load coming from?
Yeah, how are we going to get more electric load?
By expanding existing businesses and attracting new businesses.
So when
By growing the areas that we serve, or helping be part of the growth.
so maybe I don't understand what you mean by electric load. I guess I understood it as more electricity is going to be flowing in on those lines to increase the load. Did I misunderstand what that?
Yeah, no, that's correct. Yeah.
So where do you see the generation of this electric load coming from? Because I see on your slides you're talking about how data centers can be a source of consistent demand.
Sure.
Not necessarily where's the supply going to come from and how's that going to affect local municipalities.
Yeah, so I think whenever we're doing our studies, if we're looking at a project and saying that as part of the project, you need to put new generation in, then that's where it'd be coming from. So can't sit here and say, we're gonna grow, we're gonna add 1,000 megawatts next year, and we're gonna add 1,000 megawatts of generation. Like if you look at a project right now, like if we look at some of the projects that we've seen, it can be served by existing transmission capacity. It's just that you have to improve the highways that get that electricity from areas where it's being generated to that spot. That's the upgrades that need to happen. Not necessarily you need more power, you just need to improve the lines that get it there essentially. So, I mean, generally speaking, if you're gonna, double the amount of load that you're adding, yes, you're going to find new generation sources. But that just gets evaluated project by project. So it's kind of hard to like say without a kind of specific example, if that makes sense.
Where are we in our capacity? Are we at, for the demand of electricity in, say, the upper Midwest or the area that you cover? Where are we in capacity? How much more load can you actually handle with the generation that you are working with?
I am not the expert on how much capacity we have. What I can say is that there's still quite a lot of improvements that can be made to the existing infrastructure to take advantage of capacity that exists today. So a lot of the projects that we study, there's capacity there. Just, again, we need to improve the infrastructure to get there. There's a lot of power lines in this country that are from 1950, 1940, 1960 that are old. So we're still working with some pretty old infrastructure. So I think we still have quite a ways before, like, we need to start building gas plants all over the place to be able to serve this load. I think eventually it will hit a point where, there's this much demand and there's this much capacity, but we're not there yet.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess the main concern I hear with large load customers coming in, data centers coming in, is we already are concerned about electricity use. And in the rural areas, there has been concerns of straight voltage for years. And that's going to be a concern as more energy is going to be demanded and consumed. Is where is it coming from? How are we going to deliver it? How is it going to be safe to the environment? Get that they're not being strained, that when we do wake up in the morning and turn on a hair dryer, some of us don't need hair dryers, right? But that is there. We become all we expect certain things whether we should or not, and it's just a little glitch, there's going to be phone calls, and that's I'm sure there's a concern of a lot of people is that draw of energy is being asked for. Where's it going to come from, and how is it going to affect the environment around us?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to try to wrap your head around, because the reason why someone out in rural Arcadia or wherever, somewhere around here, might have an issue with not low voltage or the unreliable service, that might not be because the grid as a whole is constrained and we're running out of power. Like I said, it might be because the actual transmission lines that get out there are old and need to be replaced, or we have to make improvements to a nearby regional substation that allows more capacity to go out to a specific area. So while the grid is all interconnected, there's also like hyper localized issues. And so the reason why you might not be getting reliable electric service is not necessarily because, like I said, the grid as a whole is like constrained, there's not enough power. So it's hard to like speak to it generally, other than obviously if you're going to double the amount of load that the grid is going to have over the next 20 years or whatever, what some of these regional transmission operators are predicting, and you will need to add generation sources eventually. So I would say, we are at Dairyland, we take an all the above approach for new generation. And so, we're if we study a project and there needs to be new generation in order to support that project while also maintaining reliability with our existing member base, then we're gonna tell that that we need a new generation source and they're going to have to pay for it, whether or not we own it or they own it. If that's what required to serve a large load in order to maintain that reliability, that would be a requirement of the project. Does that answer your question?
Getting there.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah,
Okay, but I would piggyback on that, so you mentioned a few ways to reduce rates, if you increase the load that Joyers talked about, or, but you kind of skipped something like reduce waste, or, reduce, increase efficiency of systems. And so, I believe the number one source of waste in the grid is transmission over line. So if you're saying add more load by transmitting electricity further distances, you're actually increasing the waste of electricity lost in the transmission along the line. And increased efficiency could be diversification of power sources, not central loads. So decentralizing power generation and having lots of power generated in small areas, every rooftop, every yard, would increase efficiency at the local scale, reduce the need for transmission, increase efficiency, and then allow for more electricity to be available for these large loads needed for places like a data center or a factory or other commercial needs. And so part of the problem is there's a lot of waste. So how can you account for the waste that's generated in transmission, and you could get rid of that and increase decrease rates that way?
yeah, I guess when you say like waste, what are you referencing? Like,
Well, they can look at the energy loss going along the line, the heat and vibration. I mean, there's a pretty decent loss in the power generated at one source, sent along lines, only a percentage of that generation gets to the end user that's lost in the transmission. So, due to physics.
yeah, I mean, I'm not a physicist, obviously, so I can't speak on the specifics of like energy waste on transmission lines, but I mean, if capturing that waste was less expensive than building new infrastructure, I would imagine an prudent utility would do that. So I'm sure if that truly is the case, that we can score that. So, but that's a good question, and I'm gonna find out an answer on that. So thank you for asking that.
Supervisor Doyle?
Kind of continuing that discussion, so if we need to, let's say we're not like a like a much control this time. Sure. So we have increased the demand geometrically, and we get a fair amount of our energy from the coal that's coming through, and we have projects like CapEx and so forth that were fairly controversial, and where you see the result of that along the interstate in Wisconsin now. So all these data centers are built. Are we going to need to run more CapEx projects? And who pays for that? I mean, is that factored into the cost that these data centers have to pay? Because I would look at that as an indirect cost. It's not just that they're a big part of the reason for it. So how does that factor into them, as they pay their own way?
Yeah, so I don't have slides on it, but there is they're called long range transmission planning projects, and there's tranche 2.0, there's tranche 2.1. Darryl and Excel are partnered on some regional transmission projects. Those projects would be happening regardless of the data centers were coming. So I don't know the specific economics of how we get rates of return on that, and I'm sure I won't even get into that, but I mean, I guess I don't think that. I guess I don't have a good answer for your question because I'm not a long range transmission planning expert, but I don't think that, again, when we look at projects, we look at it at more of a local and a regional scale. So I can't answer the question like for the entire state of Wisconsin, because we don't serve the entire state of Wisconsin, like looking at it from a single, I'm responsible for making sure that across 50 data centers that there's no indirect costs for these larger projects that have to happen in order to make these projects work. But again, what I can say is that when we examine a project, when we look at it, partners, we might as well use it. We say this is how much it would cost, and this is what needs to happen in order to service loads, maintain reliability. So that's what the developers need to pay for, or we did pay for.
And I guess I would call that kind of hidden cost, that, okay, we're getting a break right now because they're paying for whatever they're building and locally, but in the long run, our rate's gonna go up because they're doing more CapEx, like project, where then it's not being pushed to the data center developer, it's being pushed to the everybody else. I mean, is there a way to track that? Actually, I've heard not to track it in reverse, I've heard to predict it. The factor that in is a cost.
It's a good question, and I guess I don't have any studies out there that I know that anyone's done, but it's a good question, so. Yeah. Thank you for your honesty, I appreciate it.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This kind of question here for you and for the Excel representatives. What are your, customer, in your customer base, they're not just customers like co-owners, right? And you guys so often, so, well, there's different kind of voice there, but what are you hearing about data centers, about large load customers from your customer base, your co-owner base, your co-op? Are there lots of messages of concern, or, just kind of, what is your thumb on the pulse of this issue? Moving forward, since it is pretty visible.
Yeah, so I'll answer that this way. So yes, we have member owners. So if you're a member of a co-op that's provided power wholesale by Dairyland Power, you can be on board of directors. And so then hypothetically you can board of directors of Dairyland Power, which is really cool about the co-op model. As Alex mentioned earlier, we have an obligation to serve when people ask to be served by electricity. We don't get to pick and choose who gets to get electricity. That would not be a good world I want to be in. So, generally speaking, that's our purview on this. Is we try to provide as much information as we can about what it looks like when we get these requests for large loads. And Dairyland is a bit unique because again, because we're a wholesale provider to all of our member distribution cooperatives, they have the relationships and people get their bills from a member co-op. So that all that communication between them. So I can't speak to what they're doing individually, but we've had people make that connection and reach out to us and ask the questions, and we have to defer to where a member cooperatives want to communicate because they're on us, and so we can't speak on their behalf, right? But people are concerned. It's I'm not sitting here saying that there's absolutely nothing bad out there about data centers. But what we try to do is try to come to that with our perspective, what our understanding is, explain who's going to pay for what, explain the utility side. But people always ask us like all the time about water and backup generation and what are these data center developers, what are these data centers going to do about this? We should have data centers that question. They've done a great job of making this utility problem in a lot of instances. So while I love a lot of the partners that we work with develop these projects, sometimes these projects are between a developer and the city. So I think we have to understand where each player is in their lane. And so we do the best we can to provide the information that we can. And if we don't know, like I said tonight, we'll say we don't know. That's something we should ask whoever's involved in this project, right? Just like you would for any other project. So that's what I say. I don't know, but
Well, I agree with a lot that you just said. I'm sure you are hearing, we're treating a lot of questions and some concerns from our customers. The regulated utility go through a public process that invites public participation. So in our large load tariff, we asked for that to be a contested case proceeding. So we will have witnesses who will raise their right hand and swear to tell the whole truth, and entities that choose to intervene, and that will have the opportunity to present their own witnesses and cross-examine ours. In addition to that, kind of like party hearing process, there will be opportunities for the public to provide comments not only on this large tariff filing that is currently pending, but any generation that we will need to cite in Wisconsin to serve the rural that will also be a public process, and certainly our reviews are public processes as well. And so we are hearing a lot of questions and concerns and kind of going through a public process to invite our feedback. But that's a really important part of for us to understand and for the commission to understand as well, the decision.
Okay, any other questions? All right, Ian, thank you so much for coming and sharing knowledge with us tonight. That brings us to the fact that our next meeting is Wednesday, September 9th at 5 p.m. And with that, that brings us to the end of the agenda. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much.